I mean, it's not really going to be that big of a change for us. It's just moving a lot of logic around, really. But yeah, just got to figure out where all the lines need to be drawn. And like part of our point is we just want to get something out there so people can start thinking about it and using it. And then there's a relatively large set of features that we've built or are very close to having built that we could add on at some point. It's just a matter of figuring out what goes in now versus later.
Can I ask you about maps? Content maps. You said you're going to have the two IDs.
So the maps is still conceptual. We
Yeah,
haven't fully built this.
Right, no. So I'm not, in a sense, I'm trying to give you some usage cases which will be helpful in terms of thinking that through.
Okay.
So I think possibly you're talking about 3 fields on that table. Is what you're thinking at the moment?
3 fields at a minimum.
Yes. Yeah,
And those 3 would be the
two
left
IDs.
ID, right ID,
and relationship in that direction.
Yes.
Right.
So
And
you would actually do both sides of the relationship? And
yes. And so it would model both ways.
Both
so you could reverse either. You could look at either.
So you might be allowed to go one way but not back again.
No, it would always model both.
Yeah.
Just for reference.
So,
but that way naturally will adapt to social
but you
networks.
might have, I'm just thinking, you might have a scenario where you want the same relationship on both. So, say
Do the same thing.
Do the same thing. So,
With
say
the
you've got a
same
family.
relationship ID.
So, as I'm a child, okay?
Okay.
And I want to model my friends, my cousins, and people I play football with.
Okay.
Okay, so I need mappings for friends, I need mappings for cousins, I need mappings for football team
Okay.
members, co-football team players.
And you could have
You
the
can
same
have the
pair
same people,
represented
we can see
several
people
times.
several times. So you need
Each with a third attribute.
Because,
Yes.
because your cousin might be
Right. But what distinguishes is the relationship identifier.
So you have the relationship identifier as well.
So when you run the
Oh,
filter,
so that's right.
And
And
so
each
there's-
relationship, each dyad is going to have an identifier.
yeah.
Correct.
And so that relationship then, so you need
And its
the
direction.
content map, a rule in a sense also to say whether it's one to many, many to one, or many to many.
So generally, like one to many, many to many, one to many is built into the way that the tables are structured, right? If you want like a one-to-one, you have a column in a table that says, an ID, right? Or if you want a one to many, then you have a separate table that's, a primary key, and then it can have multiple reference IDs. Or if you want a many to many, you just have, multiples, whatever, right? Technically speaking, you can do any of the relationships in the many-to-many table, and I don't necessarily think it's up to us to actually define it programmatically. It would be more just like a property of the relationship. Say this is a one-to-many,
So
and that's how we would
that'd be the
manage
code
it.
logic to basically lock that.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can provide a helper for that, right?
Yeah.
So like scrubbing those
Yeah.
types of relationships, we would have to know
Yeah.
whether or not, or we'd probably want to know whether or not it's a one to many or many to many or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It
And
would
whether
help
it can
us
go one
clean
way
up
or
a little
both
bit
ways.
easier. Another
But certain contexts would also like define a filter. So if you were to be picking on user groups, it's going to automatically filter down to a certain kind of relationship.
Correct. And that's
And that's
actually
part of it.
critical for making what would be a very large table quick to
Manageable, yeah.
use,
Right.
because we can filter by conditions and then suddenly get it down to a very small number of rows. I don't know if I've said this yet, but this whole thing uses NODB.
Okay.
So that's going to be possibly a challenge for the CMS. It uses the NODB engine.
Yeah, because we don't.
Well, technically NODB is installed by default.
Yeah.
And especially now that Oracle owns it, they're only pushing NODB. They don't even want to do any more development on my eyes.
Yeah, no, that's.
So I don't think this is going to be a problem really. But it's going to be the first platform component that will require NODB.
Okay, that's important to know.
Yeah, I figure I should mention
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, it is a big deal.
I mean,
Yeah.
technically,
So-
technically it could be written to not require it, but it would require a lot more extra code to clean up
Yeah.
things.
Okay.
So like when you delete something with an NODB and it actually has the foreign keys, you just delete from the main table and it will cascade through all the other tables. Right? Otherwise you have to go through and delete it from every single table, which is tedious. So yeah.
I'll tell everybody something interesting, which is that, you know, we have the DB17 branch on Subversion right now, and for the first time ever, I installed it and ran all the new queries that we wrote on with MySQL. So it was all, their stuff was all working great with Microsoft, but was not really working in some cases with MySQL. But as of last night, when I installed it, it was. So that was really sweet. And so whereas like 2 weeks ago, if you had asked me if there was going to be multi-DB support for 2.5, I would have been maybe. I would have said the platform supports supports whatever you want, but the CMS doesn't. But as of last night, I have to say, like we did screen sharing in the afternoon, and I was like, here's the problem, here's the problem, here's the problem, here's the problem, and he fixed them all. The ones I mean, I'm sure there's still more, but it was like, these are, so I'm pretty optimistic about that, and that then means we can, I think, start thinking that's like,
Because it shows we've actually pulled all the stuff out from.
now, the Postgres guy, Gabriel, is, you know, working on stuff too. So I have to get him to try, now that this happened, I have to get him to try on Postgres.
Step up to the plate.
Yes. I mean, he's written, he has done a great job, I think, on his the driver he's making. It hasn't done a pull request yet, but he's got like tests for everything. He really came through. So that's cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Can't wait. We just gotta stop doing that MySQL specific stuff. It'll be okay.
Right. Well, that's the thing. So that's going.
You're not using compare statements in this one.
No, it's hard to do return statements with really complicated dynamic queries. I mean, you can. I've done it before, but it makes things more difficult. And if you're building the statement programmatically, it's not such a worry
No.
from the SQL injection side. You don't get quite the optimization that prepared statements that they allegedly get. I'm not sure. I haven't done a lot of research.
No. Well, certainly, it used to be relevant, but it isn't.
So, hopefully. Any other questions, concerns, snide remarks?
I just had one come through that I think I'm just going to answer, but said, please ask Rob if Joomla is against integrating with Google Analytics, Maps, Twitter, or other third-party services.
Or against them?
Yeah, and I think
What does that mean?
How would we be against
we're not.
it?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. We're not really against it. We don't specifically do it within the core.
I mean, I'd love
not
to have some
important.
framework
Yeah,
APIs
it would
that
be.
would allow us, or that supported that. I've certainly written in another life a Google Maps connector, but
Well, there have been many Google Maps connectors and Twitter connectors.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think
so
someone
this is
just needs to
someone-
step up and create a
Like Lewis has told me 150 times that he wants to make a location library, and then it'll have like maps and all this other stuff. But the truth is, in the end, someone has to build it, right? I mean, it could. Joomla the platform
Step up,
especially,
put it together.
the platform can do
Pull
anything.
request.
You don't even have to make an argument that one of the cool things about the platform is no longer is the argument it's not used in the CMS relevant? So,
Right.
like, all of a sudden you can say, I'm gonna put UCM in now, or I'm gonna put in JImage, even though the CMS isn't really ready for JImage. So, but, and it could be some other cool thing. So, just, some people have to step up, right, and write the libraries, or help the other people who are writing libraries, write things, and write, and then write, you know, child classes.
And tests.
And tests. That's the biggest thing right now, to me, if you want to, if people are interested in like helping, if you, unless you have something you really want to write, but just like getting better test coverage on some of the ones that, like if you look at the test coverage graph, which you can on the developer site, you could either look at stuff that's pretty, that's like 50% and try to get up to like 75%, or there's some that are like really low. And there's some that are really low that are probably going to get, the reason they're low is because they're old and they're going to be replaced, but, and nobody wants to take the time to write tests for them. But it's just, you know, the more tests we have, the better. And then, you know, soon the CMS will have its own tests.
Well, the other thing we need to do, I think, is integrate the code style so we're the same.
On the CMS and that. Well, we were talking about.
Having two separate
Were we
ones
talking
created.
about that? Were you and I talking about that? Or you and I were talking about that yesterday? Or Thursday? We were talking about the code style issue.
You don't want two code style issues, and
We need a snipper.
and you need the same one for the platform as you have for the
Yeah,
CMS.
right.
It's just trying to keep it.
We've done some work on, you should count an autocomatter written in PHP, which we probably adapt into a platform app. Or we run it on part of the platform, and or I've run it on the platform, but not all the possible things this can do. And probably should do that on CMS too.
I just don't
We
want to
need to
lose.
start running Jenkins. But it would be so scary.
Yeah,
that-
I'm
not
trying to
until,
wait
not
with
until
that.
it's not 90%
Yeah.
red.
Well, and I
Like right now it would be 90% red.
I want to still be able to do the alternate version in the HTML things. Because that's a big thing for the designers. And with those little,
But actually, that's
just the little question. I mean, the curly brackets just get lost when you're popping in and out of HTML.
Well, I forget
Oh,
the
no,
end
that's
if.
I can't
Standard.
stand
That
the
is
col-
our
I can't stand the colons and
I
endings.
know.
I can't navigate the code.
Once you're used to not using, yeah.
I
It
navigate
depends what
both
you're
of them
used
all the
to.
time.
But that is the
Matter of
standard
preference.
for the layouts, is to use both.
It is in the CMS. I don't know if it is in
Well,
the
there is no
platform.
HTML. in the
There's just-
platform.
Oh, yes, there
Alright, I
is.
think this conversation is kind of
No,
going
that's
off
all
topic.
going, all that stuff is
Slightly.
going out.
Okay.
Almost all that stuff is going out.
I mean, if you guys want to talk about code styles, that's fine. But I
No.
don't think you need me for that.
No.
Okay.
Slightly less mind.
Okay. So we got that
He
question.
said putting it
Touche.
in.
So what else do we need to do in terms of building it out? In terms of,
And testing it.
like in terms of, like which questions should we be asking like on the usability side? If we want to build a user interface to use this.
That's a third step, probably.
Well, like it's like, thank you.
I mean, there's a user interface.
I missed. I wasn't looking.
What? The answer to the exam? Or what?
Well, I gotta save some stuff for my talk on Sunday.
Oh, it won't hurt.
No, but it's like, like, okay,
time to
if we
soak
had,
in.
if we
I'll
thought
do it
of,
on Sunday. I'll spend a lot of time.
Oh, share. Come
But you have a sample
if we had an
component you
administrator,
developed.
if we still had an
A sample application.
Yes, sample.
Right, from which you could extract the elements of the component.
Application component. Pretty darn similar.
Yeah.
You know, the only nice thing about the application is it doesn't have to have option equals
Yeah,
blah blah
yeah.
blah everywhere.
Yep.
Or bootstrap with the CMS.
Right.
Was supposed to.
Anyway,
I'm
so
just saying, say you had the admin with the pages at the end.
they could look just like they do now if you want.
No, they wouldn't, because we don't have a thing to create content types. So we'd have to have a tab for content, maybe content.
So content types, like creating a content type, it's like 3 fields.
I know, but you need the 3 fields. So we have
Put
like
it in a
one.
modal. I don't know.
Okay.
That's what UI designers are
That's-
for. I mean, I'm not going to try and do the job of a UI designer.
But
I
I'm just
know I'm
asking,
not
like,
one.
what are the
I should find them in an
forgetting
XML
that,
file.
I just kind of want, well, that's what
It's drop down the content types with an add menu, and that opens a mode to collect 3 pieces.
But it's like, what are the 3, like, if there were, like, so that's one function we have to have. One function we have to have is putting in,
Start
putting
laying
in
out the screen.
entering content, right?
So in my example application, there's an article about how to create a new content type that
Nice.
explains how to do it in SQL and in code.
Very nice.
Oh, interesting.
So, for example, if you built an extension that needed a new content type, you could register it in the install function.
Is this code somewhere available?
It will be when they release
These
everything.
legal things or what?
Well, we just want to get it cleaned up the rest of the way.
And
He just wants 2 more
time?
weeks.
I think it will be publicly visible within a few weeks at most.
So in November
Yes.
2011.
Just to be sure.
I mean, you know, we came into this with the very real concern about talking about vaporware, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're not here to talk about some stuff that you're not going to see for 6 months. You know, we want this stuff to be out there and people start playing with it as soon as possible. You know, that was a very concrete concern of ours. So I say that so I can convey my seriousness and how quickly we want it to be available. And I think actually right now Lucas is working on unit tests for it, or so I hope he is. So we'll see. You know, it takes a bit of time to test a really complicated piece of database functionality, you know, especially considering all the crazy stuff you can throw at it and it has to sort it out. So, you know, I know there's a few issues, right? Like, then there's some like just like systemic issues, like, you know, most of the things in content can actually work with anonymous users, except for like. How do you track likes with anonymous users? It's the same problem I always have with voting. Right? It's the same thing. Like, well, okay, it's kind of a problem, you know, because you can't like track someone's like when they don't have a user ID. I mean, you could track it by session, but that only goes for 15 minutes or maybe a few days. Yeah, and then, you know, so do we just disable that programmatically and say you can't use this feature if you're not logged in? Or do we just default like ACL says require registered? So like these are some questions that we're trying to figure out. You know, and it's just we'll probably just make a decision and then put it out there and see what the feedback is.
You can't do it on the
There's
fly.
it's in the content thing where it's like it says in the code there's like a comment that says, well, theoretically you could let a non-logged in user create an article, but we're just going to assume you're not going to. But if you run Wikipedia, that's what you do, right? You let so it's not actually you know that far from.
Right, and we made a. Yes, Ryan, this is Reuven sitting.
Hi, Ryan. Interactive TV.
It'll be like, you know, 30 seconds delayed. He'll get it right about now. So yeah, like we wanted to make this as flexible as possible, you know, and it takes some extra effort, right? Especially when you're trying to enforce NODB relationships against like a created user, right? Well, if they're anonymous, then you have to account for, okay, well that could be null, and dealing with null fields in MySQL is a royal pain in the ass. For anyone that doesn't, so yeah, you know, there's things that we're still trying to work out, and we're not going to work them all out. We'll just make some guesses and see what happens. That's all we can do, I think. And we look forward to the feedback, I think.
And so what might be interesting is if you guys are interested in it, we should just write down your names and send something out when this thing comes up.
Oh, I think you'll hear about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would think this would be broadcast pretty well.
I mean, more people like. I don't know what it is, but like people are like weirded out by this whole thing for some reason, and they think we're like trying to take over the world, and you know, like paranoia or whatever. I don't know, but you know, it's not. It's not anything scary. Like, I think if anything, it's gonna help everybody. Like I can't imagine why you would be worried about it. What is it going to do?
It's an opportunity. It's wonderful.
I mean, worst case scenario, don't use it.
Exactly.
Have you thought about the, I hesitate to use the word module, but let's say page elements.
Okay.
Inter-page element communication. So, say you have a related content items module.
Using context.
Using content in the general sense there. You know, this module should be generic enough not to worry whether it's looking at contacts or web links or articles, whatever. It should basically be the same, you know, same underlying.
Or it could be intelligent and know.
That's what I'm
it's
saying.
looking at.
So exactly.
Yeah.
What is it looking at? So how do you envisage that communication? Is it because it can't be just a page because you might have several articles on a page.
Correct. So that's
Well, would you build in an
part of the problem, and I think that also goes back to the interesting questions of lists. And maybe a list is really just one thing aggregated together, right? Because if you think of it that way, you always know you're looking at one thing, right? So it's hard to really know, and I think part of the solution could be we have this in one of our implementations for groups, or no, for members, right? You want to get a list of members. We want to get the groups associated with each member. So we have a caching mechanism, like a fast lookup mechanism, where you push in the groups, and then it will pull the ones that it has already loaded out of cache, so it doesn't have to go back and get them again. I think we might want to build something like that that's more generic, and then you can say, on this page, I have referenced these content IDs.
Yeah.
And that might be an interesting thing.
Even if they're cached, you still know what.
Right, so that way, you know, I can say, you know, show me stuff that's related to all the things that have been loaded on this page so far. You know, but then you have weird, like, load order issues. So there's a lot of questions about how to do that. And I think there's part of that problem is in the architecture of a module, in that there should possibly be like a buffering execution before it actually does the rendering.
Yep.
And I don't know how that would actually work, but part of the limitations is, well, you know, what if it's the first module that's rendered? Well, then it won't get the benefit of anything that's rendered after that, you know. So.
But if you're buffering first, yeah.
Well, not if the related one is the first one, right? It's
You
like
need the model to be processed first, is it right?
right. So, you know, maybe like a really fantastic and probably unlikely solution is there's a way for the page to know every content ID that will be rendered on that page. You know, like if there was a mechanism
Before it
for
renders
that,
the first one.
before it actually
It's
renders
1 to 3.
anything, right? It knows which
Then
ones.
becomes
Right, so maybe
feeding in
that's
on
something
itself,
that
doesn't it?
a JPage could do. You know, maybe that's something that could happen there. Well, it will know every specific content ID that's referenced on this page, and then anything on that page will also know every specific content ID that's rendered on that page. So maybe
From that
that's
give you a
something-
namespace of attributes that also could affect every one of those.
Right, you know, and then you can have more introspective type programming and say, well, you know, if you're displaying a group, then I should display related groups, but make sure to exclude any groups that
It's
are already
already been
referenced
listed,
on the
exactly.
page.
Sure.
Right, so like that's the type of stuff that you can go and do, and it's hard to do that type of stuff right now.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
so like a really good example is we have this like featured groups, new groups, most popular groups type of setup on one of our pages, right? And
There might be
some groups are referenced in all three,
Yeah.
which is partially wasted. It's like, okay, well, you're really pushing that group, but you're also wasting an opportunity to push different groups for slightly different criteria. And that's just one of those problems that we can't really solve in a generic way. We could build a mechanism to do it, I'm sure we could, but I think it's something that the CMS or the platform needs to figure out a solution to.
An interesting problem.
Yes, it is an interesting problem. It's a very interesting problem. And there's lots of kind of related problems. So I had this labels extension, right, which is kind of like a weird tagging thing, and for aspiration tech, I built a module that actually looked at all the labels that were loaded on the page to find content that shared one or more of those labels. It was like related articles by label. And it's the same type of problem. Like, you have to know all the labels that are loaded first before you can do that. And like what happens on a search page, which also loads the labels, right? You're loading a ton of labels, and it's kind of just like weird, quirky things that happen. So, yeah, lots of fun challenges. Let's see if there's anything else I have to talk about. I think I've talked about it.
It's funny because this was like last year. It still is, but is it content? But is it like Christmas tree? Or is it content? And that's why. And because sometimes it's content, and like the argument that I had, because I really actually
You might want to like a comment.
well, like a comment, or as the person said to me. So on some websites, the action is in the comments, and some websites the action is in the lead. So in a forum, like on the Joomla.org forum, people ask a short question at the beginning. The question isn't the important part. The answers are the important part, right? And the answers are the same idea. They have to hang off of the initial post on a forum, but the answers are the important part. At other places, it's the post that's the important part, the blog post or whatever, and it's the comments that are not that are secondary. And so people don't necessarily want to, So it's like that was the argument for thinking of them as content, because sometimes you want to make them be the important part.
Right.
And a knowledge base, no question.
Yeah, exactly, the same thing. A knowledge base.
Right. Part of that is, like, I think distinguishing between the concept of comments and discussions.
Yeah.
So I think a related paradigm question is like, how would you think about Twitter?
Right.
Right?
That's a waste of time.
I mean,
Thinking
just intellectually, like, how would you,
Can you thread it?
Because, logically, every tweet should be a unique piece of content. Like, that's how Twitter thinks about it.
Yep.
But then, like, a response to a tweet or
Exactly.
like a retweet, like, how do those fit in? Are they unique content? Do they map to the other stuff? Like, obviously they have to map, But are they like sub things as like a thread, or is it just like everything in isolation and they just have like all kinds of cross mappings,
So, but the
From a
truth
platform
is, if you
perspective,
had
you
a-
enable all.
If you wanted to make comment something like a comment, but that is content, you could make content type for that. And if you want, and if this thing that's underneath is more of the other type, and there's no reason you can't have both.
Right.
Depending on your need, what your.
But it's a question, it's a decision for the CMS. It's not
For the CMS,
platform.
that's right. The CMS, that's a good
So
question.
from a
It's
platform perspective, you
decision.
would build both.
From the platform perspective, you would build both. And if you're running a website, you could
Yeah,
have
you've got a
both.
use
And
case
then
for
the
both.
CMS has to decide. The CMS has, the problem for the CMS, the way I see it, and now, and especially since I wrote the book, is that you need to be able, with the CMS, to give people enough to make like a coherent, sensible brochure site without installing anything extra.
Yeah.
But then you need to give them infinite extensibility, right? So that's why I'm like concerned, because people laugh at web links, but in fact web links is extremely useful for many users. And on a simple brochure site, I use web links for in the media. Right? So every time you're in the media, you want a simple, where am I in the media? You make a web link, you have your little sentence if you want or not if you don't want, and you're done. And it's very simple, it's very easy, you can do it even from the front end. So people mock web links, but the truth is,
It has its place.
It has its place. And it's also a good kind of basic like the 3 extensions that are in there besides content are good basic examples, which if you want something more complicated, it's like anything else in Joomla. It's extensible, right? So you have simple web links, and then you have SOBI, or you have Masterstream, or whatever else is going to extend out. I know Rob's like, but whatever. You have a catalog system, right? So web links is basically a simple catalog system. With external links, this thing fills out. Then you have another thing that's, you can have contact. It's okay. I spent like a summer refactoring it for 1.6. But if you really have a lot of contacts and you really are running or if you really need CRM, you need to install a full-fledged CRM or contact management system, right? Or a directory. If what you're doing is running a staff directory, you need to install a full-fledged staff directory system. But with contact, we give you enough to do a basic one relatively easily. And same thing with news feeds. Like news feeds, the way it's set up in the core, it's extremely simple. Like it's not aggregated. It is what it is. But if you have a feed from a social networking site that does a feed, you can put your feed in really easily. So and you can have your module really easily that shows it. And so that's how I kind of see it's like the core CMS is this really simple basic thing, and then you can extend it. But people need to be able to make a full basic site with what's there, and then go complicated.
Yeah, I understand that whole theory, but at some point, the basics have to evolve with the technology.
Sure.
And with the trends and with the way that the web
It needs to be a
evolves.
best case
So in the
implementation
old
of its
days,
level.
like,
It can
if
be
you-
simple, but it needs to be good.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
And for the most part, the CMS hasn't really followed that. It's just been like, this is what it does, and that's it.
Right.
Like that's the wrong mentality. I think,
I totally agree with that.
So you have to keep improving it. Keep it simple. It doesn't have to become this crazy complicated CRM, but it needs to continue to be
Absolutely.
good enough to use
Right.
in a
No,
realistic way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm just, that's why I think we do need to give a little bit, for the average, for kind of a simple install, you do need to give a few things that are ready to go. And actually that make it maybe more WordPress-like or a little more Blogger-like, just simple. There's some simple things. We're just building a really simple site that would make that even easier. So,
Attaching a map to a contact.
exactly. Exactly.
This is
exactly.
just where the technology is.
Or
It should be
attach.
easy to
I
do,
know.
but we
exactly.
haven't done it because that's
Well, you know
not
why?
in the current feature set.
No, it's because attaching a map to a contact isn't in the feature set for the platform. It's a CMS feature. But so there's always been this thing back and forth of is this appropriate for this? Is this appropriate? So the platform people have always faced this pressure of, but we don't need that for the CMS. And the CMS people haven't been able to make libraries because it's this isn't a platform appropriate library. So now the CMS has its own libraries. We can have maps, and we can have cities and states. Countries and regions. We're putting hopefully. Countries and regions as
You're gonna
fields.
pick up cities, but not the big database.
Cities is a pretty big database actually, if you looked, if you do the world.
I've done it. I know that it's
Well,
serious order of magnitude.
yeah, but cities, but regions and
Springfield,
states,
they-
regions and,
That's
pretty
and
cool.
countries.
What is a pretty big database?
I know, Rob's like.
Nothing in your, this is nothing in your scheme. I'm just talking about the,
Yeah,
as everyone, I hear everyone struggle about the size of what core looks like.
right.
You know, this would potentially double the size of it.
Well, you could take the approach to like,
That's where we really need those check marks.
Like,
But that's
uh,
why some things could have a push button install.
Right.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
But like even, and then we have this constant battle
We're
with
just going on
compatibility
beyond
issue because
it.
like I
What do you
want to
think of
put
it, John?
cities,
Geo-
I want to,
no,
I
geonames?
more or less become like the maintainer of contact and because since I refactored it and if I put cities, if I put a country and the city's region field in, so then what happens to the current ones? So, and they have to actually be new fields because you can't delete, because people who are upgrading,
Oh.
right? So it's like
And all of a
every
sudden you
single
got
time,
data
the
that doesn't
problem with the
validate.
CMS in a way is it's like this massive battleship, so like any little turn you make, when you have like 2 million installs, if it affects 1% of 2 million installs, it's a lot of people's websites are screwing up, so.
So we're talking about 3.0 here, aren't we?
Yes.
Right,
we are.
going back to that.
3.x.
3.x, 3.x, right. So we've got here
3 series.
foundations for what the CMS can be built on. We're talking about adding maps into context. Well, if we just have a custom field mechanism, where basically you've got your content types, you define your content types. For the content type, you say, right, we have some mechanisms for defining custom fields, which could be coming from plugins, it could be part of the core, whatever way. Your content type says, right, I want these custom fields, and then all of a sudden, you've got a definition of a map, and you can attach a map to a contact, you can attach a map
Yeah,
to
you
an
can-
article
See, I don't
about.
think it makes sense to say we need to be able to attach maps to contacts. It makes sense to say we need to be able to attach
To be able to
maps.
attach, and then you need to
Yeah.
step back and say,
Yeah.
actually, we need to be able to attach
Which is
custom
why we
fields.
need a location.
Then you need to step back and say,
Yeah.
actually, we need a mechanism to be able to define custom fields. If you can do all of that, then,
You're on
hey
the way.
presto, you're on the way.
Right, exactly. So,
And that's not difficult
Well,
to
the
do.
tricky thing is, generally a geolocation is actually 2 fields though, so it's a little bit more complicated.
Right,
Well,
right.
well, and
Because
you
the
do
lat
maps.
analog.
You need
Yeah.
the zoom, you need the zoom.
They're generally
This is-
separated so you can do
Right.
Lat along
queries based on their.
Right, and then you may, like you said, you may have Zoom, you have other
there's-
pieces
yeah.
of information, but
But that's
yeah,
all
I've
embedded
actually
in the
even
custom
looked at
field.
those.
Yeah.
You know, because it's basically it's a
would
collection of
have those
information about
collection of-
the information objects
well,
attached.
it'd be, right, because it'd be a field with a type that would include all
So
of those
there's
bits.
the other really thing, and you don't always need a CCK.
Right.
There's also like just like a JSON config data. Add some config fields.
Well,
And then a way to.
At a
So you
level,
know
aren't
what?
those synonymous?
So,
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, but the downside of that is they're not searchable.
Well,
Well,
they're
You've
not.
got to
They're not.
take-
they're
well,
not-
technically, you can
they
search
are,
in the
because
JSON
it's a
string, but
substring.
it's a substring. The substring searches are
Well,
not good.
Kate-
are they?
Kate
They're
just
gonna-
puts theirs in as the
Define
JSON.
searchable though.
Yeah.
Define searchable. Do you want to do like a?
efficiently searchable.
Do you want to do like a exists within 15 miles of zip code type of thing? Like
No, 'cause
that's searchable.
That's searchable. That's searchable. Yes.
A geolocation, like as a float value, doesn't
Yeah.
mean anything.
No.
Right.
Unless you're doing that.
No,
Like,
no.
If it's in a JSON string, it's fine. Like,
No, but if-
unless you're doing
No, I
those
was
types
thinking in
of
terms
queries.
of searching in terms of other fields, not just
Right,
location.
because you might decide, okay, I'm putting in, you're setting up a series of books, so you're gonna put a title, an author, a description,
Right.
various things in there, and you're gonna wanna be able to just easily search those, and if those are all as a JSON string, you still wanna be able
Well,
to search
that really goes down to how Finder works, and we actually, so like for each of our content types, because Finder isn't really built very elegantly to deal with this. We define specifically which fields we want to be indexed.
Right.
And it's a little bit of extra coding on our part, but it's fine. We don't mind.
This is why we.
But for example, in Zoo almost by accident gave Finder an ability to define which fields get indexed.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah, I built a
kind of
whole
hacked
shopping
around.
thing, and it's like,
Huh?
I built a whole shopping cart, and it's got 20,000 products in it. and it's giving back kind of garbage searches, even if I turn on the full text and then I try out Finder and it just like, it works so perfectly.
I went, so yeah, it has this whole like layout builder where you can organize how the fields are displayed, and I just kind of tweaked that a little bit and pulled that into Finder's plugin for Zoo, and used that to configure which fields in Zoo should get indexed for each type of content. And it, again, it was a fluke. It was like just something I accidentally discovered. I was like, oh, huh, maybe I could do that. You know, it's totally not built for it. You know, the UI around it refers to all kinds of different terms that don't make sense. But you know, ultimately, I got to leverage this UI that was pretty nice that they built. It's just like drag and drop, and I didn't have to do it, so I'll take it. You know, but something like that could be done. You know, if you're going down the whole CCK route anyway, and to say searchable.
But now, how does
Okay, that's why, that's where, like, that's an element of building it out.
right?
That makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
and if you really want to be crazy about it, you can say searchable by access level.
Yeah. That's what.
What does a core level CCK look like?
That's
When does
what,
it
that's,
stop?
That's
is that
what
what,
we
that's
need
what
to
I've been
talk
asking
about.
for the past hour and a half?
Yeah.
What does it look like? So, because that's the problem, because we have 6 months to figure that out.
And build.
And build it, and
Yeah.
build it. So you don't have that much.
Well, I think it's
long
like,
figure.
an inner, you know. It's,
But it's where is the logical boundary that it stops at, as opposed
well,
to?
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a boundary?
Is there a boundary?
Or is it
No,
every
because what you're
data input
doing is,
element and every?
Well, a boundary is boundaries. They
people
go
are
off
able,
different directions.
what you're doing is making a boundary of how far you allowing people to do what they want to do. And that's pretty, you know, it's.
Well,
and
but I'm
that's-
trying to balance
Yeah.
weight of core and
Right.
Well, I think-
overreaching in its
I think the
capability.
simple thing is you build the basic functionalities and then
Yeah.
you allow people to have pluggable fields
Yeah.
that
Right,
they can
that's the
install.
big thing, is that custom pluggable fields.
Because really, there's only so many
Once-
fields that you
Yeah,
need.
yeah.
You know.
Once there's, the JForm went in, like, really revolutionized it anyway. The truth is, it's really easy to build something CCK-like using JForm, right?
Which is the
So-
way it should be done, right?
Right, exactly.
Well-
So like, right.
All right,
no,
I want to hear the rebuttal.
I mean, no, but I mean in the sense of, no, because it's, you use plugins and you use, whatever, it kind of totally revolutionized how you could think about a simple one, not one that's got drag and drop and all sorts of.
Right, but you want something that has some performance too.
Right.
You know, if you're using plugins.
This is like,
for
I've been
everything.
playing around with this a lot.
Yeah, JForm is not quite robust enough to really do it. You know, it has some underlying concepts that make sense.
So you can do it for small things.
Yeah,
Well, like
you
that
can,
might-
you can, you know, we
My,
sort of
URL
magically
thing.
figured out, oh, well, we can pass this thing around and you could add extra stuff to it.
Yeah.
And that kind of was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
that's neat. Let's see where we
Well,
can go with that. You know, but it was
So you're
it was
saying-
not really designed for that.
Yeah.
And
No,
it's
but it-
not robust enough. It really isn't. It needs
Is it directionally correct? Are the paradigms right? Or is that where the issue is?
No, I think really a form like the fields are not descriptive enough, and
Right.
mostly the problem is, or a large part of the problem is that they're oriented on the single property, and you really need to say, you need to think of it as like a field as like a behavior, and say I want this behavior, and it can be modeled to one or more fields, and that's what it needs to encapsulate. And the JForm doesn't do that very well.
Okay.
Like the metadata, most of the metadata, there's in the CMS, there's like 4 metadata fields, and there's like the big description one, and there's keywords, but then there's a field that's just, it's just JSON, right? It's just, and it's very, very super flexible, and you can make it do the fields that you want. So if you want to do Dublin Core, you can just make a plugin to do Dublin Core if you want, right? So.
But I'd be curious as to, you know, we've got several different CCKs that have come out, and they all use different methods of dealing with where do you put this custom field that people are creating? You know, is it added to a database? Does it have a separate field someplace? Does it throw it
Right.
into JSON? I'd like to see a discussion on which is the best way for Joomla to
I don't think there
actually
is
do something.
a best way.
Or what the pros and
There's-
cons of the different ways that
Well,
one can
yeah,
use
that's
it.
a long conversation. You know,
Well,
there are
that's just
some
part of
things.
it.
It depends on how the field is going to be used, and that's why it's important to have behavior,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It's not an abstract field. It is a field that you want to have a specific type of data in, and you want to be used for a specific purpose.
Except that they're going to be used for different things under different situations.
Right. There needs to be like abstract. I just want a text field, right? I just want to enter a text. It doesn't matter what it is, right? But at some point, you're going to say, well, you know, this isn't just a text field. It's a ISBN number.
Right.
And as an ISBN number, it needs to have
formatted.
other properties. It needs to be formatted in a specific way. It needs to be indexed in a certain way because we don't want the dashes to be removed. And it needs to be, you know,
Yeah, don't remove leading zeros.
Right.
it
That's-
should probably
that's what
it
you
should
do.
it should
No, but
probably
that's
have
what you
a
do.
unique enforcement on it. It should have
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know various other attributes
Right.
to it.
Right, yeah.
And it's encapsulating behavior. And I think you know geolocation is another good opportunity. It's generally two fields,
Right.
and it's encapsulating the behavior because you don't if you really want to take that to its full possibilities, you don't want it to be in JSON. You want it to be in the database so you can do conditional
Exactly. And
queries
that's, I
on
guess
it.
that's sort of my question is, are you going, is at that level, are these kind of
So
things
if
that you be throwing into a JSON, or are they
I think
things that you
I
be
think
creating a
Zoo
data?
went down a
database.
closer approach to it,
Yeah.
and that they were encapsulating behaviors,
Mhm.
right? They had like a comments behavior. It's not a comment field; it's a comments behavior, you know, that they put on things. And I think that's a sane way to go down that route, and that's probably.
And that's what
I
allows
would
it
I
to
would
be
think about it
context.
as behaviors rather than as fields. I wouldn't want a CCK where you just add fields and you have to like somehow describe the logic behind them. You just say it's this behavior and
Exactly.
that's it. You know, and then you can have lots of behaviors
So
that
like-
build on a set of basic fields.
Like an image would have the ability or not to upload,
Yeah.
and what your upload
Right. Or
limits
maybe you
might
want,
be or something.
you know, maybe you have several images, and maybe some of them are cropped, and some of them are not, or
So,
whatever.
so the thing is, like, one of the things on your list from the ideas was the form,
Mhm.
having a form link, and the truth is, one of the issues right now is you have to, we have a lot of really cool fields, and we have a lot of potential to do things like ISBN numbers and stuff like that, but you have to do it all in the XML pretty much. And I mean, you have to store so much of the form structure in XML, which means you have to go.
or that's the expedient way to.
That's the expedient. I mean, you could make a string that's like an XML string. It's not literally an
It's
XML
actually
file.
not that difficult to write PHP and JavaScript code that will generate that XML for you.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. It's like we haven't done that, right?
No.
So like right now, so that is why it's hard for people to make a custom field right now for what they want because they have to.
But some of the CCKs are doing it in the database with attribute value pairs.
Right.
Field
Yeah,
name,
those
field
are
prop, field prop.
nightmares.
Yeah.
You can't do very much with those.
No, but-
That's the sad part.
Now, who's doing one like that? What's that?
That's how Masa Tree does it. They have like just a generic attribute values table and they're mapped. And
Visible does what you work with.
it's very difficult to do any sort of reasonable database query on it, on one of those fields. You
Yeah.
have to do a bunch of joins, and it just blows up what should be a simple query into a lot of joins. I remember like once I tried to like join on 2 fields to like filter by 2 attributes, and I think there was like 8 joins on it or something like that.
How does
This-
flexi content do it?
Huh?
Do you know flexi content?
I'm not familiar with that.
You can ask Sebastian how they do it with Sebbook.
What is that?
You can ask Sebastian how they
How
do
they
it
do
with Sebbook.
Yeah, they do it differently, quite a bit differently though. Their whole paradigm is different. From what you told me earlier.
Well, they build all their own data structures.
Well, they like piggyback on all the core UI. Like so, you interact with Statelog like for the user manager in the user manager, right? So if you want to add extra fields to it, you do it in the user manager, not in like its interface. so they do a lot of like extending the core UI and adding extra features to it that way, which is different. I don't know how it's all data modeled. I haven't looked into it that much, but I do know that it's all in the various parts that you're actually working with, which is different. You know, I actually, you know, there's pros and cons for each one, and it's just a matter of picking the parts that make sense. I think at some point you have to have the ability to add columns to tables. That's going to be really important for some behaviors. It's critical.
Yes, I guess that's what I'm.
But it's not always necessary.
Not good form to modify the core table. So
No,
Well,
but
that's
no,
what
no,
the
no,
breakout
no, no,
tables
but
are
you
Yes,
have a
exactly.
table.
You should have a breakout
Look,
table.
it's
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
it's like if you use Civi CRM, you can define a new table in the UI, and then you define whatever fields, and you can either, and they have a list of 25 field types that you put into that thing, and then at a certain point, they used to have it all in normalized fields, and it was a nightmare. And then they said, "Oh, we're going to actually take each. When we're always having to define these groups anyway. So each group that you define is going to be a table, and then you can have separate tables, and and you can. It's very flexible. But anyway, what they ended up with was kind of like this ability to create a new table in the database that would generate its own columns, and then." It was a long time for them to figure that out. Like the earlier versions weren't like that, but that's how it ends up happening. And it's actually by far we've talked about this. It's by far the best forms component in a lot of ways.
Is it actually driven from the form layout?
No.
You drop an element and it
Oh
creates
yeah,
the
no,
table
well no,
behind
you
it?
go in and you create. There's a form layout.
Okay.
It's complicated, but because it's complicated. I mean,
But it's
the
because
truth
you-
is, no
because-
matter what,
but from the layout,
if you're
you generate the
making,
table.
if you're generating new tables, you're adding fields, and you're creating groups, and you have tags and groups, and it's complicated.
Yeah.
And relationships, they have, like, actually adding relationship types is really important in the CRM, right? Because whether you're doing it because you have like donor, who does on the board does the donor know, versus parents and children and grandparents and children and siblings and whatever. So just inside the CRM, there's tremendous like relationship data. So it's
Well,
right. I mean, it's like.
I think it's after 4:30.
Being able to define relationship types is really important.
Yeah.
See, I didn't even
That's a
think
great
on
model.
that. It is. I was just.
To the
because
point
this
that you want to
relationship
replicate it?
type-
Use it as your test
I'm
case?
all the time, like,
Yeah.
we should be, I mean, I think everybody's a Joomla user who uses Civi CRM, would like to see Civi CRM actually move on to the Joomla framework, but they're,
Yeah, the framework is bad, but the way to create the relationships and profiles, a model interface.
it's incredible.
My wife
So
wrote
incredible.
this back. MetLife is doing insurance online marketplace and reducing a process that used to take about 2 months down to a few hours.
Wow.
But she was kind of lost in how am I going to, there 50 states and I need different forms for, they require different things, different blood tests, different whatever in your state. So I pointed
They don't have a
to
localization.
No.
Civi CRM interface
Yeah.
where you can just
Like-
start
like that.
to map different
Yeah.
profiles, in different fields. So
Okay.
you map the data in one, and then you include the data in the profile, and then
Yeah.
just hook it to the
It's
menu
there,
in
and
Joomla,
it's
and
like,
there it
boom,
is.
you have it in your table. And then the cool thing is, with both because their API is better and ours is better, like you can just pull all that stuff into your
Oh, yeah.
content.
The Joomla guy, the Drupal guys just jaw dropped when I
Yeah.
all of a sudden pulled the form up.
Yeah.
They were like,
Oh.
how did you get the form in? Oh, you just do this.
Do this. It's like 2 lines, right? It's
Because
like,
they're like doing all this.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
have to build the view and.
yeah, and we're just like, ta-da, here it is.
Magic.
It's magic. Okay.
Essentially, but let's take things together.
I suggest that we just get together for about 10 minutes and do a little wrap up of what went on in the meetings? Well, you guys did in the overview wrap up of each of the two groups. How's that?
So it's, yeah, you gotta, I think you need to.
Hi. Let's move this around. That was the up close and personal look. Okay.
Simple, bronze, silver, gold.
Yes, exactly.
So what we do is import by category, plugins for the module, so I can get to duplicate it. We're replicating a site that's doing it.
Okay, we're gonna.
You do Joomla. Going back
Hi,
to
I'm back to the microphone here.
I want to do
It's about 20 up now, thereabouts. So we're just going to get together for a few minutes and do a quick wrap up on the two different groups that we did this afternoon, the multi-site and the content, and give a brief overview of what transpired. So you probably want to, are you still streaming?
Yes.
I think Mark here is going to give the first.
Go, Mark.
Hey, here we go. Can I do this without my glasses?
Use the mic.
That's the big question. Okay, we have a brief but pithy report back from the multi-site group. The definition that we came up with for the working definition we came up with was one set of Joomla files and multiple websites with the ability to share content across the different websites. And for example, one of the benefits is you would update, like when you do a version update of the site, you do it once. And when you publish articles, you could push that article to one site or to all sites or some combination. Then we discussed the fact that there are several different ways to implement that. One way is to have a separate database for each Joomla site. One way was to have one database for all the sites and keep the tables separate by using a separate table prefix for each site. Or another way, which Sebastian showed us based on the sublot, is to use ACL to limit the access to each site based on the user profile, so that each domain mapped to a different to a different user via the ACL, and then based on what user you got mapped to, that's the content. Those are the items you saw on the site. And there you could have either a super admin in the back end that could see everything for all the sites, or you could have admins for one site that would only see the components for that site. Excuse me. Then we discussed a couple of things that we decided were not in the scope of what we were talking about with respect to multi-site, but which a lot of people might mean when they use that term. One was the notion of having separate sites for like staging or development or testing, and having the ability to maybe deploy something on a test site and then roll it into the production site. That was not what we were talking about with multi-site. And then the other one was the notion of having high availability deployment across multiple servers to handle either really large scale sites, or to handle failover type situations. And we did not include that in our definition of multi-site.
A question from Jonathan Neubauer is, in your definition of content in the sharing of multi-site, do you include components in that, and component code?
Yes. Yeah, because there was one, everybody agreed that you would have one set of Joomla PHP files. So for all the sites. So if you install a component or an extension or whatever, it would be potentially available across all the sites. It might not be published or visible in those across all sites, but it would be in the Joomla program directory.
Would you do localized overrides of the XML?
As we are aware of the problems that that Joomla, as it is now, is difficult to realize that if you only think of the modules, you place them in a module position, and with multi-sites, the template on one side can have different module positions. But that's a problem that has to be solved with multi-sites. But the goal should be that the code is exists only once on a multi-site system. What we thought.
Yeah, well, one copy of the code, multiple copies of the configuration.
Okay, I was sort of taking some notes on the content one, so I'll give a very brief synopsis of that. A lot of what we did to start was Rob gave us information on the United Content, or whatever, the UCM, Unified Content Model, that hopefully will be out within the next month or so, that we'll get to play with. And using this as a way that the data can be modeled all one way, so that you don't have the distinction between this is a piece of content, an article, and this is a web link, and it's all going to be in one, so that you can write things for it once and be able to use the same behaviors for it. And you will, by treating it that way, there are a number of different things that you'll be able to do with it. And he's actually going to be giving another talk on the whole thing on Sunday, if people are interested. What time on Sunday is first thing?
Which one?
Rob's. 9.
Unified content model?
Yeah, the unified content model.
Is it 9:30?
9:30 Eastern Daylight Time, and we'll be video streaming and stuff. Hopefully,
Depends on the connection.
Depending on the connection.
Yeah.
It'll be a different streaming section than what address than you've got here, but it's on the front of the website for the Joomla Day New York City, and that'll be on Sunday morning. And then we started talking about, well, if that's there, what would we then go and use it for? Because what will that do? I mean, some of the stuff that you could do is you could do versioning control very easily. You could get it so that the CCKs would be another thing that you could use, that you would build on it. And I noticed on some of the Twitter feeds, they were talking about, we've got a number of CCKs already, why do we need to talk about another one? But one thing is that this would be a different base than what those are. Plus, if we were to try to draw one of those others into core, first we'd want to look at what, you don't just want to blindly pick one, because they're all created in a different manner, and they're all using different ways of how they deal with the different custom fields and everything. So you want to figure out what's the best way to be doing that. And so you need to talk about that first and figure out that. Anything else people want to talk about from there? We talked about a lot of things. I think that's pretty much it. Okay, so, all right. Any final words? from
Amy
people?
wants to know when
Okay.
the the content model might be available publicly.
Well, she was watching the stream.
I know. I think she's just nudging back at you.
Oh, it's been on the stream several times, people are saying November, so. you know.
As soon as
It's
possible.
as soon as they
in
can.
November.
As soon as they can,
Can
and
never-
we're estimating
it's
it's gonna be
software.
in.
What was that wonderful phrase that we used to use? When it's ready.
It'll be ready.
When it's ready,
It'll be
right.
dark.
Right.
No, as soon as possible.
It's as soon as possible.
Uh,
And it is set
2 to
up
3
so
weeks.
that it's one of those things that could be added in, it's compatible with what is currently there, it's an additional library, so it's not breaking anything by having it in existence. Okay. I think that kind of wraps up this meeting, and hopefully we'll have another one. Right now, we're looking at, in 6 months, another meeting like this. Maybe connected to Java. So, see y'all then.
Thank you.
Thank you.